Welcome to the Red Beard Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Alex Greene, and I'm on a mission to bring the power of embodiment to people all around the world. In this podcast, we explore how embodiment practices, trauma healing, and knowledge about the human nervous system can help us find our ground, discover new sources of meaning, and create connection in an ever-changing world. The deepest change is embodied change. I'm very excited to be having a conversation with Michael Waite, and we're in very different time zones because I'm here in Boulder, Colorado, and it's 4 p.m. on a Friday. And Michael, very generously, is on the air at 7 a.m. Osaka time in Osaka, Japan. So, Michael, thanks for accommodating our time zones this way.
Oh, totally. Good to see you.
Yeah, well, so Michael is, I won't go into all of your accolades, but the way that I connected with Michael is through his super interesting podcast called The Brain Shaman. And a couple months ago, Michael interviewed me to talk about embodiment and Zen and nervous system work on his podcast. But that is an easy follow to go check out Michael's podcast. Super creative. It is so far. I haven't listened to every episode, but everything from neuroscience to the themes around TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises, the nervous system, several episodes on VR and AR, which is what today's conversation is going to be about. Feldenkrais method, sort of a wide-ranging exploration of topics related to understanding being a human being and through the brain and the nervous system. So awesome stuff. And part of Michael's background is having worked in the virtual reality and augmented reality industry in Japan, and also being a curious follower and student of the evolution of that technology. And so I asked Michael if we could have a conversation about where VR and AR seems to be headed, or actually what's here today and where are things headed. And my interest is from the perspective of embodiment and therapeutic work. And so that's kind of part of the questions that I'm going to be, we're going to be getting some insight from Michael is how is virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, how are these things already shaping, interfacing with our human body and nervous system in hopefully mostly positive ways, maybe some negative ways, and what does the future possibly hold? So that is the theme for our conversation today. Michael, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Alex.
Well, let's give us just a little bit of a backstory. Like how did your interest in I know college days was philosophy, and we've connected over that and the philosophy of perception and all of that. How did that lead you into this interest?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it as on topic as possible because I tend to just dig into all the ultimate causes, butterflies flapping their wings and stuff. But
right.
Yeah, basically, I think unconsciously I was always kind of trying to seek embodiment, and doing philosophy, you are in your head, you're often rewarded to be disembodied, to be thinking, to be rational. And so I think I sort of just gravitated towards travel and going overseas to get to a place where maybe I can use my body, just the typical youthful things of drinking and playing and dancing and all that. And so that led me to Korea and then Japan. And yeah, I did start, using my body. And I kind of have forgotten about this whole interest in perception and that I had loved in my philosophy days. But, now I'm in Tokyo and it's 2018, right in the middle of this VR boom. And Tokyo is sort of the Silicon Valley / New York of, Japan. one of the VR
Hmm.
centers. So I was in that social ecosystem, and I bumped into people, and that led me into a job in the industry, which was sort
Mm.
of my entry point into VR. First time experiencing it back then in 2018. So yeah, this is with a company called Psychic VR Lab. They're doing pretty cool stuff. The name itself speaks. And I left that job, and then I started Brain Shaman,
Hmm.
and then the two kind of started to merge together. Um, so
Mm.
now I'm realizing that like there's this beautiful overlap between virtual reality and philosophy and the brain and the body, and it's a cool exploration. I'm excited to see where it takes me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, awesome. Good. Well, so back in 2018 when you were involved in the company, like what was the state of VR AR at that time? Like what devices, what was going on at that stage?
Yeah, so that was the time of PC based tethered VR was those were the main systems. The most popular ones were the Oculus Rift, which was tethered to the PC. There were external sensors that you set up on your desk to track your head movements and hand movements. So it's in the controllers. The sensors were in the controllers, and in they sort of little towers, basically, that you set up, and you have to plug 20 things in. And then the HTC Vive, which was same thing, but the sensors were sort of put around the room, and these external cameras basically would detect where your body is in space, what your hands are doing, and all of that. But it could only do it roughly, and it's a big pain in the butt, and it's expensive, and it required a gaming PC and all this stuff. There were no standalone headsets. I'll take that back. There were standalone headsets, but they were these 3 degree of freedom ones, phone-based VR. So that was the other sort of side of this. Things like the Google Cardboard, where you just snap a phone in there. Samsung Gear VR, which was a collaboration between Google and Samsung and Oculus, and same thing. Just pop the phone in there. A lot of people got their first experience of VR through that phone-based, clanky
Right.
3 degrees of freedom
Well,
VR.
right. Well, I'm going to have you define 3 degrees of freedom in a moment here, but so as a quick aside, you know, I was aware, that's so what, rewinding the tape 5 years. I was like aware of those things and around that Google Cardboard thing. And what's funny to me when I look back is the thinking I had at that time for myself was, well, virtual reality is probably going to be like really interesting someday. But if where we are right now is the stage where I order this cardboard cutout and I fold it up and I put my phone in it, then if that's sort of the current avant-garde, then I'm just going to wait for a while, which is what I've done. I have never. I'm having this conversation with you, having never put a VR AR device on my face, so
Yeah.
I'm new to all of this.
Yeah, it's a bit like Feldenkrais.
Yeah.
Like you can talk about Feldenkrais as much as you want, but until you experience it, it's a whole other thing. But you can kind of get an idea, I
Right.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, so you use this term 3 degrees of freedom. So that was sort of what does that mean, and what has changed?
Yeah. So your podcast is all about embodiment. So let's talk about it from that perspective. In terms of embodiment, I mean, we are always embodied. Whether we're in VR, whether we're looking at our smartphone, whether we're on a roller coaster or whatever, we have a body. We have a body.
Sure.
We might be kind of looking at something else through the smartphone, for example, but we're still around that in the periphery is the real world. And outside of that VR headset is our real body. With 3 degrees of freedom within the VR world, within the virtual world, you cannot use your body at all. You're literally like locked into your body. If you can turn your head around and look at the things around you. Essentially, it's a smartphone stretched around you in 360 degrees. And a lot of these experiences on those 3 degrees of freedom headsets, those phone-based headsets, were essentially just 360 videos. And they weren't even 3D sometimes. It was just sort of stretched out photo around you, and you just look around at it. And if you just take a step with your foot in the real world, nothing happens within the system. If you move your hand, nothing happens. If you turn your head,
I
you can
see.
see around you, but that's it. You can't move through the world. There's no movement.
So it's the equivalent. So when you're in the VR space, it's the equivalent of you can stand or sit there and you can turn and look around, but that's it. You can't move forward, backwards, crouch down. None of that is possible.
Yeah, so when we say 3 degrees of freedom, we basically mean like turn your head left to right, up and down, and you can kind of spin it around. There's this like if it's an airplane, it can kind of turn in a few different directions, but it can't go forward or backwards or anything like that. It could just sort of spin around and look around.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. So that was then. Now we're now. What do we have these days?
Yeah, well, soon thereafter, around that same time, around 2018, 2019, we did start getting 6 degrees of freedom, especially because I talked about there's those sensors, which were mostly outside in. So it was tracking you from the outside. It wasn't built into the headset. It's sort of these external sensors you got to set up. But that allowed you to walk through the world. And when you walk through your room, for example, you would walk through the VR. We could wave your hand around and your hand in VR would move. So the tracking started to get better and better. And then it started to get tetherless, because when you're one other alternative from these phone-based VR systems was the PC VR, which is still basically stronger than the current systems like the Quest 2, even the Quest Pro, and all of those, but it requires a setup. With those, sorry, I lost my track of mind. With those,
I think
yeah. Because so basically it got untethered, but when you're sitting there, you got this cord around you, so you're literally chained up. You got a freaking mask on, a heavy blindfold on, and then you got this weird tail kind of thing that's wrapping around, so you might get tangled up. So even though you technically could move through these worlds, you don't feel safe to, because you're gonna trip over things a little bit, because it hasn't really well defined the space in front of you. Even now, VR hasn't really gotten to the point where, and then you get the cord. So it got cordless. But then with the cordless, basically the computing power wasn't strong enough. You're using smartphone technology, and we're still using Android technology to power these Quest 2s and stuff. So you got kind of lower resolution and all of that, and lower frame rates and all that. But it's getting better and better, and the sensors are the thing. And then the speed of the internet. All these other things are getting better and better. But I might be fast forwarding too quickly.
No, that's fine. I mean, in some ways, I think knowing where things are today is probably more interesting anyway. I mean, so Apple announced, a couple months ago, the forthcoming Apple Vision Pro with a big, sort of release, and probably 3/4 of the commenters were commenting on the price at $3,500 or something like that for their release. But probably the other 25% of the conversation was around a lot of the innovations with optical tracking and a lot pass through, et cetera, et cetera. So when I watched Apple's video, which I'll include in the show notes here, that was the first time that I was actually sort of like a little bit excited. That my attitude of, well, if it's cardboard in my phone, I don't give a shit. Now that I see where we are today, I'm a lot more interested than I was. And I know Meta's about to come out with a new version, much less expensive, but still having some of those pass through features. So what if you share a little bit about what the current generation of consumer level technology is like, and then let's talk about applications, therapeutic and otherwise.
Yeah, so the biggest player in the field is definitely Meta. The Meta Quest 2 is the main most popular device on the market, but it's already like 3 years into its life cycle, so it's about to die. Next couple of weeks, Meta's going to release the Quest 3, priced at around $500. It is going to have a better chip from Qualcomm, so it'll be able to. It'll be a better experience. It'll be better. It'll look better. I don't know too much about it yet, so tune into that. But what it's not going to have is it's not going to have the hand tracking that the Apple Vision Pro has, which I think is amazing. VR has been controller based outside of the phone based ones, the HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift, and then all the Quests and all these things that came along with it. They've been using controllers, so our hands have been sort of locked into these controllers, and that's how we move our hands. The Quest is going to continue that, and then we have another player is from China, Pico 4, which is part of ByteDance, which makes TikTok. They're the other big player, but usually in the US it's not there. Also pretty good one. And then now Apple. So it seems like it's Apple and Meta at this point. But like you, when I saw that Apple Vision Pro, that also got me really excited more than anything else before. The price tag is the only thing really stopping me at this point. But what's amazing about the Vision Pro,
and it's not released yet, right? I mean, it comes out next spring.
Yeah. But like, what's amazing about that?
Unless you have
no, I want it. I wish they could just give me one. Like, can you give me one? I'll make something. But the eye tracking. So now, literally with that, you can. Before we have to use like a laser beam. You got to put the laser beam on the menu item or the object in the world and kind of drag yourself through it. Now you just look at it, and then that'll control the scene. You can grab things by looking. You can use your hands. So the hand tracking and eye tracking are way better. It's new technology, and there's eye tracking in the Quest Pro, and it's going to be in the Quest 3, but it has more eye sensors for the eyes. You know, the Quest 2 might only have like one per eye. This has two per eye. Has all these external. Has a bunch of cameras that it's good stuff. And the Quest 3 isn't going to have all of that because they're trying to price it lower, so they have to kind of choose what are we going to add and what are we not going to add. But yeah, the Vision Pro is like that's the turning point with the eye tracking and hand tracking.
Yeah, super cool. Well, so you had a guest on that I listened to that episode, Amir something or other, and I learned a lot about a field that he's in, and you'll probably remember the name of his company. But the industry is, he used a term that I thought was very interesting, which was digital medicine or digital therapeutics, and is sort of the idea that his company is creating products through VR to work with cognitive performance and evaluation and other things. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that if we can.
Yeah. So just as on the phone, we've noticed that there are a lot of these sort of mental health apps, things like Calm and what is Headspace and Luminosity and all of these other things, to Duolingo. The same thing's happening in virtual reality and augmented reality. And Amir Bozorzade's company Virtual Leap is one of these. I would compare it closer to something like Luminosity, where you're doing these brain training exercises, but in VR, in 3D, in a more immersive environment where you're going to remember things more easily. Just to increase your focus, to increase your memory, to do all kinds of things like that, and increase your cognitive abilities. And there are other companies doing the same. I can't name them all off the top of my head right now, but some are focusing on other things. Just going to hospitals, for example, to help patients experience a more beautiful, meditative, relaxing world, for pain reduction, for all kinds of things. Right.
Well, yeah. So he, there were a couple examples that he gave that sounded really interesting. Like, I think one of their cognitive programs was, like you say, around focus as a treatment for ADHD or other kinds of things. But he gave some interesting examples of, using VR as a pain, sort of proven analgesic factor, sort of pre and post surgery, as instead of a pharmaceutical pain medication, that a VR system was able to create the same response or a similar response, which was pretty fascinating. And then he gave a couple examples from psychology and trauma treatment that I thought was interesting, like around exposure therapy, like for example, working with phobias of public speaking, or the sort of VR modules where it puts you into that immersive environment. Of course, logically, that it's just VR, but there's so much cues to your senses that your nervous system still responds as though those, you're looking over a high balcony, or there's a snake there, or you're standing in front of an audience. And that to me was a really interesting application. Can you share a little bit around what you know about that sort of work?
Yeah. So what's great about that is it's like in dreams, for example. When we're dreaming, we can experience these things safe from the safety of our own bed. We're just laying there, but we can't just consciously choose our dreams. Usually, it's more of a that's lucid dreaming. But even then, with VR, it's kind of like that. You're kind of popping into this safe, dreamlike state where you can experience these worries and pains and fears and things. And visually and auditory wise, you're going to be in it. You're going to be up next to that snake or that spider, walking across this plank. That's a classic VR experience, walking across a plank, flying in an airplane, public speaking. But you're sitting in your chair basically. So our body remembers things really, really much more easily when it's 3D, and even better if we're moving through the world, if we're actually using our motor senses. So that's maybe. I think it might even get better if we, like for the planking example, for example, you are actually walking, so that's even more powerful than just sitting in your chair looking at the snake. But if we can add things like haptics, for example, too, and you can touch the snake and you can some olfactory, you can smell it. It would be even powerful. Even just visually alone, that's enough to sort of retrain your brain to say, hey, I'm safe, I'm okay, I can get over this.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, so touching on that example for a moment, and this is maybe it's a little bit getting into a topic that I was going to push a little bit further in the conversation, but I'll bring it up now anyway, which is because part of my thinking is I'm starting to imagine, some of the modalities that I do: somatic experiencing, which is a form of trauma treatment, internal family systems, which is similar. It's a way of looking at the psyche and through a particular lens, and I'm starting to kind of imagine for myself, well, 5, 10, 2 years, 10 years, how are these things going to be done? And this example of the plank, where the difference of simply statically being in that experience versus mechanically walking, sounds significant to me, because a principle in somatic experiencing work, that's Peter Levine's work, when we are looking at, let's say, for example, traumatic memory or something that creates activation in the autonomic nervous system. In somatic experiencing, we're very interested in, if we are going to recalibrate our response towards a memory or a stressor or a trigger, we're much more likely to recalibrate our nervous system if we're physically involved in some way. So in SE, even though usually you're sitting down, that might involve movements like literally walking with your feet, or gesturing in ways that are meaningful relative to sort of the scene or the memory or the scenario that you're working with. And so just to your comment around the plank, how much more powerful it is to actually locomote with your real body, if your goal is to develop more embodied confidence around that scenario, and a less triggered fight or flight response, then certainly matches up with somatic experiencing, thinking that the more we can physically involve the body, the more likely it is that it's going to land in the nervous system. Does that resonate with kind of how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, and even from VR aside, if you listen to podcasts like Andrew, like Huberman Lab, he says the same stuff, where we learn best for adult neuroplasticity, for change in our brain and habits and things. It's the motor senses that really get us changing most rapidly. When you make mistakes with gravity, you have to remember that, because this is the most fundamental part of our survival. And the earliest things we develop that babies learn how to walk before they learn how to do everything else, pretty much, even before they can talk or anything. So it's we need to remember it. So I think it's vital that if we can. This is also why the 6 degrees of freedom, and beyond that, we need more. We need to be able to actually walk through the world, not be trapped in our chair in VR or AR. When we're just sitting there, it's only going to go so far. Yeah, we can add like haptics and we can add smells and things, but I think the actual movement through our real world, the augmented reality, for example, the Apple Vision Pro will kind of allow. Well, even then it won't allow, because it's a battery problem. But you can go through there, and then that's going to open up a lot more possibilities for learning and change and trauma therapy and all of that.
Well, let's take a minute. I mean, we've been using the term VR and AR and pass through. Could you just take a moment to just define that distinction? What is it that's what's the difference between VR and AR, and what's significant about Apple's forthcoming product or on that side of things?
Yeah, well, with any technology, any kind of visual or sensory technology, we're always basically inhabiting two worlds. This real world that we're in our body, in our actual, on Earth, and then that virtual world. So, I mean, even with the phone, for example, you could call that sort of a cheap, or the TV or the movie or Disneyland or something, as a sort of cheaper version of virtual reality. But it's not fully immersive. So VR, you're cutting off as best as possible the visual world, and hopefully more than just a visual world. In the sort of ideal Ready Player One sense, you'd be in a haptic suit, and you're literally, all of your senses and nerves and everything would be tied up to that. But that's like decades and maybe a century away or something. But you're basically the gap between these two worlds is really cut off. You're just literally, at least currently visually, you're in that world all around you in a headset. And there might be some light bleed. You might kind of see your feet underneath or off to the side. And that's sort of a problem with current virtual realities. You just look at the phone, you can, in the center of your vision, you can see that virtual world, but around you, in your periphery, you see the real world. So it doesn't really work. And with VR, it gets better because it cuts off more of the world. But the more that it cuts off, that's more VR. AR is, the main feature is the real world, and you're just adding layers on top of it. Think of like Pokemon Go or little holograms that you walk past. But you can literally walk outside. You can go to work. You can do all your normal stuff. You can talk to friends. And you're just adding little virtual layers and objects into it to augment it. And mixed reality is kind of the same thing, pretty much, but it's kind of maybe mixing the two together. It's a word that Microsoft invented to try to like brand their own little thing. And so back then too, back in the days of 2018, 2019, Microsoft was also in the game with all these Windows mixed reality headsets, and they were actually the first to have the inside out tracking, where the tracking came from the headset itself, and that was actually cool. But they Google and Microsoft kind of gave up on that, but they might be coming back. Anyway, sorry, I kind of ramble sometimes and go off in other directions, but pick it up wherever you want.
That's great. No, that's that's perfect. Well, and like in Apple's, video presentation, what I like, this sort of idea of, what are they calling it? Spatial computing or something like that, where you're in your room, I'm in my office here, but I'm wearing my headset. If somebody walks in the room, I can see them because I'm seeing the room. They can see they can see me. They can see my eyes. But then I can overlay into my space. I can bring up a screen, make it any size I want. I can move windows through the air. But so all of that's happening. But nevertheless, I'm still occupying the office space that I'm, or whatever room I'm in. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and what's also beautiful about the Vision Pro is you can also, with a little dial, you can choose sort of the level of immersiveness. You can cut off more of the periphery and make it kind of basically virtual reality, and you can kind of dim it down just to the right degree that you want. So you can change the lighting, and you can change sort of how much of this world do you want to be in, and how much of that virtual world do you want to be in. And you're always going to be in the virtual world to some extent, and in the real world to some extent. And your body, motor-wise, you're always in this world. And I don't know how we're going to. VR is nowhere near that kind of embodiment, but visually and auditory-wise, even they've got spatial audio, so the audio feels more real. Yeah, you can kind of choose the level of immersiveness, and I think, well, that's really cool. It's really dancing between VR and AR, and that's what the current upcoming headsets all will do. All the upcoming ones are, I feel, going to go in that direction. It seems they'll also go remote, controlless, hands-free. I'm a bit surprised that Quest 3 is going with the controllers. A lot of the other companies like Pico and Apple are getting rid of them. Just as we already got rid of the external sensors and all the cords and all the other extra things. So basically what we want is a light, easy headset that that we feel safe in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. So in the podcast with Amir that you did, the really nice conversation, you made a really nice comparison of so much of AR, obviously one of the main sensory perceptual channels is through vision. I mean, the haptics and over time, maybe there'll be more channels of sensory information, but the eyes are the primary sensory organ that's being connected to with these systems. And you just had a lot of interesting things to say about the use of eyes and with phones. We have a narrowed focal vision, which is associated with stress physiology. And so share a little bit about how things your thoughts on that, because it was such a rich discussion around the use of the eyes and stress.
This is something I really, really care about, and I wish more people were talking and thinking about. The eyes, yeah, they've so powerfully control a lot of our physiology, our autonomic nervous system, our thoughts, our emotions, and everything. And the way we use our eyes it's like a remote control. The breath is probably even just as big, the breath and the eyes and everything else. But the eyes,
right.
There are different eye movements and neck movements we can use to alter our physiology and cognition. With the phone, like you said, it's a tiny space. It's a tiny sort of sliver of the world, and you're focusing in on that, and your eyes go inward. Your eye muscles, the muscles that control the lens, that gets crunched up, the extraocular muscles that get flexed, and your whole body gets flexed basically along with it. Just like as you learn with Feldenkrais, the eyes are not just these separate things; it's all connected. Then neurochemically, that's cranking up the adrenaline, the dopamine, the norepinephrine, all these sort of action-based fight, flight, and also good for good reasons too. Maybe you want to get work done, you want to focus. But the thing is, like, is the phone what you want to focus on? Maybe not. I mean, if you have that same sort of inward focus on a book, you're going to read that book better, and you're going to be in it, and the rest of the world's going to be cut off. And if you're talking to someone and I'm like looking at you, for example, right now I have my own face cut off. I don't know how to change the screen on this, but I put a paper up on half of my monitor so I can only see you. So I'm more focused on you. Auditory wise, even if I cut off the visuals and I just close my eyes and listen to you, that would even increase sort of this auditory focus. So the phone is doing that. It's kind of bringing your eyes inward, which increases focus, which increases sort of energy, sympathetic arousal, which is great, and it could be bad. Stress can be useful. Stress can be not useful. But the phone kind of gets us trapped in there for too long sometimes. It doesn't let us sort of release and relax and open up our vision. So, for example, with virtual reality, I think this is definitely an improvement for the eyes. Even though the lens is right up here, it feels like the world is so far away. It's like you're looking out at this big, wide nature, this horizon. You're looking out the window at the clouds in the sky, or you're in the ocean. You can see it all, and you're relaxed. That relaxes your eye muscles. The eyes start not going outward like a deer or a rabbit, but just sort of forward and relaxed in a normal way. But yeah, kind of more out. The pupils change. Everything changes. and that creates a more relaxed feeling. It turns on the parasympathetic nervous system. It instead of it being dopamine and adrenaline, now we got serotonin and GABA and all of that stuff going on, and it's just changing the whole thing. Your muscles in your legs and feet relax. Just from kind of the Feldenkrais perspective, it all kind of connects. Your heart rate slows down. Your breathing probably slows down. You're more connected. So virtual reality is largely this wide panoramic view, and you're not focusing on a tiny screen, a tiny space. So that's pretty cool. And there's a bunch of other things too. I'm just going to kind of keep going for a minute. The neck, for example.
Yeah, do it.
With a phone, you're looking down. Your head's going down, and when your head goes down, your eyelids also go down. It creates sort of text neck, but also it's kind of a strange experience because visually you're in this sort of high energy wakeful mode, but motor wise your neck is down, which kind of closes your eyelids as well, and it kind of triggers out this piece in the brainstem that actually puts you to sleep a little bit. So you're kind of dozing off, but this thing's kind of keeping you up. It's kind of like the equivalent of like having an espresso or a coffee at midnight or something. You're like, am I awake or am I not? What's going on?
Right.
And with Feldenkrais, Feldenkrais sometimes puts you in these sort of contradictory things, like, okay, look up, but kind of close your eyes and it feels strange, or put your right shoulder up and left shoulder, leg down or whatever. I don't know the things. And it feels strange. And I think with the phone, we are kind of trapped in this sort of awkward position of head down, which is kind of putting us to sleep.
Like
and then it's weird.
Cross signals.
And it feels strange and it feels dirty and it feels grunge, and it might be okay for, as a sort of little training exercise like in Feldenkrais, but you don't want to be trapped in there for 5 hours a day.
Hours, as most people do. Yeah. So one way to think about it is if VR becomes elegant, streamlined enough that it sort of replaces our phone use as a natural evolution, towards, then it's what I'm hearing from you right now is that there might be many advantages to that from an embodied and nervous system perspective. Does that seem fair?
Yeah. So with VR, you're going to be looking up more. You're going to be looking out more. You're overall going to be more relaxed, unless you're playing some strange zombie shooter up kind of experience. Your hands are free. Your hands are more free. And now, especially with remote controllers, because with a phone, you're like not only clenching your fists, which is a kind of fight thing, and also you're kind of locked up because you don't, like, if someone comes up and attacks you, you've got to. It takes time to unclench those hands. I mean, you're done. He's got you. So the phone's like kind of got you handcuffed, and then you're and then what was I going to say? Also with the phone, this is kind of going off a different direction, and I'm just like bashing the phone now. But there are problems with VR too. But we're still focused on the phone problems. Another problem with the phone is this world shifting is happening a lot. I mean, TikTok is sort of the worst extreme example of it, where you're literally jumping between worlds every 10 seconds.
Right.
And we didn't evolve to do that.
Fire.
We didn't evolve to like just teleport
context
like that.
Switching. Yeah.
Normally, to get to change your visual environment, you have to do something. You have to walk somewhere. Right. It's work. You're doing something. But now we're kind of getting this weird, strange reward of being in a different world, and a world that's going to fulfill our needs. This world is going to give me women. This world is going to give me food from Uber Eats, and this
humor.
All your needs are being fulfilled. And normally, if we want to fulfill those needs, which is going to give us all these happy chemicals and stuff, and put our body in a good state, is we have to walk and we have to do actual action and work. But now there's no action, no work, and we're just literally, and our brain's confused because like, how am I feeling so good and getting all my needs fulfilled like every 10 seconds? And it's crazy. Our body's overwhelmed. And with VR, you could do that. I mean, the fact that one of the top 3 players in the field, ByteDance, which owns TikTok,
a little worrisome.
I mean, maybe they might go in this weird kind of TikTok VR version like that. I think that will like literally overload our system. The power of on the phone, maybe we can handle a little bit of craziness. I can't, but some people can. But if you put that in a 3D world, and you're literally just jumping between worlds every 10 seconds.
Bombarded. Yeah.
I think you literally might die. I think there would be hospitalizations and stuff. So I don't think they're going to go in that direction. Overall, VR doesn't context switch so quickly. Usually you stay in one environment for long periods of time, 10, 15, 20 minutes. No experience is really popular in the sort of this TikTok kind of jumping, Instagram kind of jump between worlds fashion. The phone, is designed to sort of do that. VR is currently at least designed to keep you in one place at a time, to not move you between worlds. And if you want to move between worlds, you have the conscious control to do so. But I think because you're so relaxed too, you don't really want to just jump around.
It seems like one major strength, probably I'm guessing already the case, and even more so over time. It seems to me that one major application and strength of VR, AR, especially VR, I suppose, is in creating probably in the realm of sort of meditation, sort of like visualizations that, nature scenes or things that match your breath, or, as you say, using the VR to help guide your vision into a wider state, which then shifts the physiology and the brain states. It seems like there's a huge potential for kind of getting into those relaxed states or meditative brain states using VR tech. Do you agree that might be one of its strong suits, at least in the near term?
Yeah, I think this is especially important for people in highly stressed environments and stressed bodily states. For example, in hospitals, it's no wonder that they're doing these meditation, nature experiences and stuff for people in hospitals. Because literally, dude, you're already like, you think you might be dying. You probably are dying, or you're sick. You're not. Your body's not in a good state, and then you're surrounded in this sort of white walls, maybe a tiny little window that you might be able to turn your head and look at. Nothing, and then these nurses coming in and just jabbing you and treating you like a machine. And when you put on that VR headset, it relaxes you. It puts you in a much better environment. I mean, ideally, we could somehow have a hospital in the forest or a hospital on the ocean or something. I think that would heal people much better if we actually healed people in healthy environments. But a hospital is one such environment. I mean, I don't know if people have been doing it, but maybe for prisoners, for rehabilitation, for drug addiction therapies, I think it could be really great. But even just for the everyday person, the guy who comes home from work and stressed out, or whatever, it's nice to have it's like there are these apps on the phone, like Focus and on Calm and Headspace and stuff, but I don't really enjoy them so much because I don't know. I don't want to, anytime I use the phone, it kind of stresses me out. I want to be away from the phone. And VR is maybe, and it's more immersive with VR. You can actually, it's 3D. We evolved in 3D. We evolved in 360, this big wide world. And if you can actually walk through that world too, like we'll walk through the forest, swim in the ocean, better versions of the plank is kind of puts you in a stress state, but kind of the same kind of motor movements, but in a more, that'd be great. I mean, maybe you can get some waterproof VR, and you got your, not your swimming goggles, but your new 2035 swimming goggles on. That could be really cool.
Totally. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that one, but that would be awesome. Yeah. Well, by then, the coral reefs will have died, but it's our VR goggles that will allow us to still scuba dive at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So a couple other sort of thoughts I've had about potential, I guess, therapeutic applications. So two thoughts involving the eyes, and I want to get your feedback on it. So one is, I'm just going to use the example of my daughter's 15 months old, and she has a little bit, one of her eyes drifts a little bit. So, what's colloquially called like a lazy eye. Doesn't do it all the time, but there's a little bit of, and sometimes it's one eye, sometimes it's the other. And so we've just started this thing with an optometrist called vision therapy. And I hadn't heard of it a year ago, but now I'm suddenly hearing it all over the place. And it's a little bit like kind of related to functional medicine. And, as you know, in Feldenkrais, there's a lot of really exercises that relate to the use of the eyes and then how they impact the brain and all of that kind of thing. But vision therapy is a modality that's about strengthening or improving imbalances with the use, everything from the ability to converge or to selectively focus, and in all sort of planes.
Yeah.
And so with my daughter, yeah, we're doing all these, we're using a laser pointer and this stuff to kind of get her eyes to move, and it seems to me like a no-brainer that VR headsets would be able to just do that in a wonderful way, because they can so many possibilities with. Well, first of all, the VR is the headset is tracking the eyes, so it's getting a lot of data on how they're performing, and then could change what's happening in the immersive environment to help guide the eye movements. So that's sort of one therapeutic application that makes sense to me. That may even be happening. Does that make sense to you, that would be a use case?
That's probably that might be my favorite use case if we can do it yet. This seems possible on the new Apple Vision Pro, but that might be sort of the first time it really was possible, because eye tracking, you can't really do these eye exercises without proper eye tracking. Yeah, the stumbling block
Okay.
is a price of that, but also it might not be as good as it claims to be. So it might be 3 years, 5 years out or something. Hopefully sooner.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if we have eye tracking, and yeah, we can have a sort of different. It doesn't need to be a pen or a finger or whatever. It can be a butterfly or a little blue ball or a sound or whatever, and you're kind of just following it, which children would definitely enjoy more too. Yeah, I think this is definitely possible, but you could do some VR, I guess, but you still need a VR headset that has proper eye tracking, which eye tracking is sort of just a new, it's like kind of like last year. In the past year, the eye tracking is really actually becoming a thing. So there's that. When you also talked about these eye exercises, it reminded me of one other thing. I keep comparing the smartphone to the VR and AR, but really we are transitioning between these mediums. We're gonna have the same kind of stuff on each device. So with the eye movements, when you turn your eyes left and right, that also reduces activity in the amygdala, and it reduces things like anxiety and fear and stress and all these things. You can turn your head or you can turn your eyes, but that does kind of reduce that activity. So, for example, when you're walking, this is also one of the great things about why when we walk or we ride a bicycle or we run, it feels kind of good. It's this optic flow of these objects passing by us, or auditory flow, where the sounds are passing by us. And when we do that, you don't know, you might not think about it consciously, but when you're walking down the street, naturally your eyes kind of go side to side and side to side. When you're riding a bicycle or when you're running, it's the same thing. And for some reason, those eye movements of kind of left to right, that calms us down, and that reduces all that amygdala activity. And so with the phone, going back to that sort of those contradictions that Feldenkrais kind of puts us in to sort of wake us up. We're doing these naturally with the phone, especially if we're walking with our phone. If you're going outside and you're holding the phone in your hand and kind of looking up, and you're basically in this sort of focused, stressed out state visually, and you're walking in a sort of relaxed state. One of the beauties of walking and with running and cycling and stuff is it relaxes you. It kind of turns all that focus and motivation and productivity stuff off, and you're just like meditating in a weird way. But when you got your phone there, you're kind of throwing away all the magic. With augmented reality, especially once the computing power gets good enough to where we can actually walk around outside, and the battery lasts long enough and all that, which might include having things strapped to our wrist or a battery pack in our pocket. Apple has a battery pack in the pocket. Meta's kind of putting a computer on our wrist, which is going to probably become a smartwatch, and kind of tying us up, putting the computers around us. But eventually we want it in the headset. If we can walk outside with augmented reality, we can do that optic flow and auditory flow. We can look around and hear what's around us, and instead of walking with our phone, which is going to increase safety as well, but also this relaxation effect.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, so we use that principle of optic flow. I like that term all the time in somatic experiencing as a tool for the same reason you mention it. That we're having a conversation. Maybe the person's been looking at you, and we're frequently taking a moment and the term is orienting in somatic experiencing, taking a moment, just letting the eyes wander, even lingering on some of the details in our visual environment, or sometimes you do the same thing auditorily, just sort of listening to the soundscape as a conscious shift from sort of a focused attention. We're talking about something or remembering something, which is more of that focalized mindset, and how to become shift gears into a more, I guess, that alternative mode.
And I think it's an outcrop of that same principle of looking out at the wide horizon, the periphery, zooming out. That relaxes you, because when you're looking out at the sky, you're probably also kind of turning your eyes a little bit, looking around. There's a bird, oh, there's a tree, but you're not sticking on to staring at the bird for an hour on end, and that, which might actually be useful too. It's a bird's much better than an iPhone, but you're just kind of looking around. You're just there. You're not focusing in on any particular object, and it's just like how we need to eat, and then we did not eat. We need to sleep and then wake up. Our body needs to sort of jump between the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. And if we get stuck on one side, that's not really good for us.
Right.
I think augmented reality especially is going to allow us to have a more even balance between these two states of the nervous system. VR too, but VR ultimately, I think one big problem of it is that we do have this thing strapped to our heads. If we can get and we are getting the pass-through AR feature, so you can like look out at the world, but as long as you're blocked off, you've got this heavy blindfold on. At least the controllers are going away, so we aren't handcuffed anymore. But we are kind of strapped to a chair. So the more we can walk around, we need to feel safe. Basically, safety's our primary thing that we're kind of after. Yeah, we want to have entertainment. We want to have sex. We want to have all our needs fulfilled. But if we don't feel safe, we're not going to use it. And I don't think people feel safe in VR yet. They don't feel comfortable in VR. Yes, we talked about the content-wise, the field of view is wider and all these things. Those are great, but it needs to get lighter, and it needs to get somehow, I don't know how it's going to be possible, but off of we don't want to block out the full world. We want to be able to quickly shift into the world. So I don't know. There's kind of pros and cons to AR and VR, and even the phone has its pros. But you want to be able to switch between these sides of ourselves.
Totally. Well, so another one I've been thinking about. So one of the nervous system trauma processing modalities that I do. I can't remember if you and I have spoken about this or not, but one of the techniques is something called brain spotting. And in brain spotting, it's a derivation of a very well-known trauma therapy, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And EMDR and brain spotting rely upon using eye movements to sort of bypass the cortex and the thinking mind, and to get into more subcortical limbic activation, and to work with where a lot of the roots of trauma are in the brainstem and the limbic system. And the way that it works in brain spotting, that's why I have my little tool here, is the therapist guides the person's vision through and explores different regions of the visual field in a slow way. And then what we're monitoring is we're looking for signs of physiological activation, which could be a breath or a sigh. It could be that there's a twitch in the face, or sometimes the excessive blinking. Sometimes the eye jitters a little bit. And then when the client gets good at it, they notice just as much. That's like, oh, there's there's what we call a brain spot. And a brain spot means a particular placement of where the eyes are directed that corresponds to a meaningful shift in the subjective physiological sense, probably objective too. If we were measuring heart rate variability and breath rate and stuff, you'd see a change there as well. And then in the work, then you find these brain spots, and some of them are activation spots, and it means that the stress or the activation increases on that spot. And some of the spots are called resource spots, And that means that there's a relative calming of the physiology or more parasympathetic nervous system in that particular placement. And so then the art of doing a session, a brain spotting session, is around spending time helping the client keep their gaze on the activation spots and sometimes the resource spots, and then allowing for physiological, sometimes verbal processing to happen. Super interesting way of working. And so to me, this will be another area where a future VR system will be able to do that, guide somebody's eye movements through the range, but then also be observing, are there hiccups or are there meaningful pauses, and then stay there and I mean, and this is maybe getting into AI at this point, where algorithmically there's some protocol that helps sort of change the physiology. So to me, it's just really interesting to imagine where these things might be headed.
Yeah, and all these other technologies, we're talking about VR and AR right now, but they're all going to kind of link up. Remember, Apple also is the largest smartwatch provider. The Apple Watch is, if you go to the Vision Pro page, yeah, you're definitely linking those up together. So with this brain spotting, for example, you would be able to do these visual exercises through the Vision Pro. This is not yet, but it's like an application that people will make. And then you'll be able to see your heart rate and HRV and all these other things. Maybe breath, with if you have some sort of breath, checker thing, and you'd have all this data that might be fed into AI, or it might just be shown to you directly on the screen, or to your coach or practitioner or whatever. And you'd have these exercises, but then you'd have this sort of quantitative data on how it's affecting you. You can see little jumps in your heart, or this or that, sudden breathing changes. Yeah, really cool stuff if you link all these other kinds of sensors, like in the Apple Watch or the smartwatches, AI kind of doing its thing, which I don't know too much about.
Yeah.
All of these, it can get like more efficient. It can tell us more about ourselves.
Well, okay, so here's another one. This is getting a little out there, but I want your thought on it. It's maybe not that out there, but it's a little bit out there. Because and this was prompted by, I was listening to your conversation with Amir, and I didn't know until you were talking about it that chameleons have a 300, that their eyes are positioned in such a way that they have 360-degree vision because of the positioning of their eyes. So it was news to me, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then I was reading a little bit about it, and I was also reading that because the two eyes on a chameleon can operate independently, they can have their brain, like unlike humans where we create an integrated visual experience from our two eyes.
Yeah.
But a chameleon can have two separate images that it's interpreting, that it's utilizing differently. And so here's where my mind went. I was thinking about VR, AR, VR especially, I guess. And I was like, those famous the famous neuroscience experiments where they put glasses on somebody's face that with mirrors that then invert the world, and so now they're seeing the world upside down. And then I think they found, I forget the time frame, maybe 2 weeks or something like that, or maybe less. But after somewhere in less than 2 weeks time, if you're wearing glasses that flip the world upside down, then at a certain amount of time, your brain will accommodate the difference and process things correctly. And then logically, then when you remove those glasses, you'll see the world upside down again, and until you can adjust and accommodate. And so I was thinking about sort of the neuroplastic capacity of the brain, especially around visual field. And I think you said that 50% of our brain real estate is devoted to visual processing or something like that. And I was thinking how you could have all these sort of wild things, like in the same way that a chameleon ends up in, having two separate visual experiences, and then they're automatically, genetically, their brain is evolved to separately process that information. And I was thinking, well, there's probably going to be all these wild things happening with humans where they, you can train yourself to visually process two separate things, or I don't know. Or you could get some extension that gives you like chameleon like 300, by the use of cameras, you can extend your field of view and then train your brain to be able to integrate that information. So I'm having this imagination that in the future there's going to be all this kind of like pushing the limits of what our brain can adapt to meaningfully integrating. Just I don't know. Do you ever think about those kinds of things, or is this just me
No.
going off the deep end?
You should be a science fiction writer. No, no. I think about these things too. I think a cool use case of VR and AR is it might be one technology that will help bridge the species together. So humans have been kind of separate and totally disconnected from other animals and chameleons and deer and dogs, and we're kind of connected to dogs, but we're different species. We don't know what it's like to be a bat, the Thomas Nagel thing.
Right.
But we can, maybe with VR,
Right.
we can know what it's like to be a bat. We could put on a bat head. It might be a weird looking headset where you got things here and there, but if you look at the animals, the animal eyes are always positioned in different positions. The prey animals have it on the side. The predators tend to have a really narrow focus. We're kind of look more like predators, I guess, but something in between. And some can see in infrared, like the pythons, and goldfish can see the whole, like the really, really wide range of the electromagnetic spectrum, all these infrared and ultraviolet and all these colors. And they also got kind of buggy looking eyes like the chameleon. And so maybe we can have these VR, AR headsets, probably VR, that lets us at least experience, maybe not fully, but this is kind of what it's like to be another animal. This is how it feels. And then with other technologies like these, I don't know if I'm a fan of them or not, but they are coming. Things like these brain interfaces, what Neuralink is doing, for example, because maybe visually we'll see, I'm a chameleon, or I'm a dog, or I'm a giraffe or something. But our brain, those maps in the brain might be like, nah, you're a human. So maybe we can alter the brain somehow with AI and Neuralink and all this stuff to where we literally are getting closer to another kind of virtual reality. A virtual reality is sort of a interspecies travel. That can maybe also improve our communication with the animals. Maybe we realize, we're not as different as we thought we were. Maybe we can somehow talk to animals. They've even seen with the songbirds, hummingbirds, parrots, they actually have, after humans, the largest frontal lobes and the largest kind of language capacities. The apes, the primates, for example, gorillas and chimpanzees, they can gesture, they can understand language, English, Spanish, whatever. They can get a vocabulary, but they can't speak. Birds, especially the songbirds, the parrots, the hummingbirds, they can actually, it sounds like I'm high on something, but they can kind of speak to each other. They have a sort of language, spoken language. And of course, we can't decipher that, but our brains are not entirely different. We've got like a lot of overlap. And maybe with VR and with Neuralink type things and AI, maybe we might find a way to at least talk to birds and hopefully other animals too. And I'm one-upping you on the sci-fi stuff. But these are possibilities.
I'm totally with you.
Yeah, these are possibilities.
Well, I mean, probably dolphins and orcas, I think, are pretty verbal. I was reading something. I don't remember what. I think it was dolphins. Maybe it was orcas that the only other known mammal that has the equivalent of like a baby talk in the way that humans change their voice and like the adults modulate their voice when speaking to babies. That same phenomenon is true. I think it was dolphins, but I don't totally remember. So I'm with you on that. That would be a pretty interesting application, sort of kind of where things may be headed. You know, it's funny. This is a little bit of an aside, but when I think about all these technological solutions, VIR and where it's heading, I'm also always struck by, I can't help but think of sort of like technologies, human technologies that preceded this type of technology. And I'm thinking more about, you know, yogic technology, meditative technology, shamanistic technology, where there are some parallels. You know, what brought this to my mind was this idea of, you know, becoming a bird, or you know, through a neural interface and whatnot. And you know, there's parallels to some of these things, you know, through shamanic work and other things. And so, to me, I think it'll be interesting as humans continue to evolve in this very technological direction. It'll be interesting to me if we lose some of, you know, the kinds of, I guess, inner technologies that have been cultivated over centuries, or if those will be integrated and enhanced. Like, I kind of have no idea where we're heading as a species, to be honest.
Yeah, because we've developed a lot of technologies and techniques and things, and yoga and meditation and Feldenkrais and all these things, but it seems to be mostly an auditory based thing. A teacher is talking to you, or maybe you're closing your eyes as an imagination thing, something built into our bodies. But VR can turn all these
Right.
Primarily audio based modalities, and you're using your body, but sort of this audio body interface. Now we could turn it visual and everything else. Another thing that kind of came to my mind when you were talking about that is there's a kind of a pretty decent overlap in the community, in the VR community, of people who are doing VR and into VR, and they're into psychedelics or things like that. So, I mean, psychedelics itself, that was sort of a I know it's a kind of controversial topic because these things are illegal in certain places and whatnot, but that is kind of one of our.
But it's another technology. It's another technology.
Another kind of VR, essentially. You're kind of showing yourself a new way to look at your own body, your own mind, and the world around you, and connecting it all together and all that stuff. So there might also be. We might. I think we'll continue to use those technologies, psilocybin and MDMA and all these things, which have been being used for therapeutic purposes as well. And they might find kind of nice, smooth ways to combine the technologies together. Maybe you're doing VR on psilocybin or something. I don't know. Like I said, these are still kind of new territory, but I'm pretty sure there will be companies doing that.
Okay, last major topic, and then I'll see if what's still percolating in your mind. But so, in your conversation with Amir, you made a cool analogy, and you said, you know, these days, you know, in terms of medical technology, we have, you know, ultrasound and lasers, and like, you know, now for kidney stones, the ultrasonic vibration targets the, you know, the kidney stone and then helps dissolve it and pass it. And then the analogy you made was that, you know, maybe VR will be, and your analogy was brain stones, and neural circuitry and things like that. And that maybe VR could be used that like a laser beam to target neural circuitry and what you were calling brain stones. And could you just elaborate on that for a minute? Because it sounded interesting.
It might connect up with your you were talking about brain spotting, for example. So maybe we can spot the brain stones by doing things like brain spotting or other little VR exercises. It also goes back to that phobia exposure therapy stuff. So maybe we find that fear, we find that unwanted habit, we find that stickiness, that contraction in the nervous system, in the muscles or wherever. I mean, in the muscles, our whole bodies. You know, there are brain versions of all this. You know, this toe over here has got a little place in the brain, and this elbow over here has got a place in the brain. It's all got like a little virtual home up here. And yeah, maybe we can yeah.
I like to use the words sensory and motor homunculus. So yeah, exactly. We've got our whole body is mapped in our mind.
So maybe we can go up here and we can get the brainstem. We can we can kind of laser beam the brainstones, the old habits, the old neural circuits, the highways that we got to bust down, and bring in the construction crew and just bulldoze it and rebuild it. And we can do that with with kidney stones. We could do that with we try to do that with other diseases and things. Sometimes it involves amputation. Hopefully we won't have to amputate parts of our brain. We can just laser it out and you're ready to go. Just a little LASIK surgery for your brain or something. And and then maybe by doing that LASIK on this little part of your brain, changing these circuits, changing these habits, creating neuroplasticity through VR and other technologies, you're going to start walking differently. You're going to start talking differently. You're not going to be scared anymore. You're going to change. You're going to open up new possibilities.
Yeah. Well, I really like that analogy, and it rings true to me, because that is well, what is the efficacy of psychotherapy of different kinds? Exposure therapy, EMDR, internal family systems, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical therapy, and so much of the research is showing that the principle of for example, memory reconsolidation, where that if we recall a memory consciously, and we then there's chemical changes in the brain, the neural circuitry connected to that memory is changed into a more neuroplastic state. And then now whatever the therapeutic intervention, which might be a reimagination of something, it might be building the tolerance to the stimulus, it might be creating new meaning around it, it may be taking the safety of the therapeutic container and adding that to the memory, the fear or the traumatic memory, and they've studied it pretty carefully. And there's that neuroplastic state is open for, it's like about 6 hours or so, is sort of, well, that increased plasticity is there, and then there's a process of reintegrating into the sort of the baseline state. So in the sort of the neuroscientific working theories for psychotherapy are not just sort of about active imagination. It's that we are retraining the brain in a very real sense through the principle of neuroplasticity. And so it just makes me think that VR is just going to, and the tools of psychotherapy are things like, imagining, bringing into the scene, well, what would a competent protector have done in that situation? What if the ideal mother was present? And these active imagination exercises are part of what changes the feeling tone of the memory in the person in the nervous system, and it's part of the therapeutic effectiveness. And so my feeling is that VR is just going to sort of take that principle and just run with it in really dynamic ways. So super, super interesting.
Yeah, and you don't have to just go in and just laser beam, bulldoze the house down, just barge down, crack down the door. You can, like you're saying, just change your brain state, change your body state in whatever way, find the key in. It might be, for example, making some novel movements, walking and dancing in funny ways and falling down. And that might kind of open up neuroplasticity for an hour or two. Then you can go study Spanish or Portuguese or whatever. Or maybe you want to focus. So you go take a cold plunge, and that's going to increase your dopamine and your ability to focus for, what Huberman says is like 4x the dopamine for like 3 hours of all day, basically, really. So, and it's going to smooth right, not that crash you get, when you smoke a cigarette or you gamble or whatever, drink, the healthy kind of spike. So, but my point is you can enter focus through cold, through coffee, through different like ways. But once you're in focus mode. And once you can enter neuroplasticity by making these motor mistakes, by falling or by dancing in weird ways, by embarrassing yourself, by just kind of thinking about, oh, I love this thing or I hate this thing, and getting your emotions stirred up. And there are a lot of different ways to kind of enter it, but it doesn't really matter. So VR might be like one way in, and it might say, oh, visually we can do this, and that's kind of a key that's going to unlock the door for this, maybe for neuroplasticity or maybe for something else. And And then,
Mhm.
but we have more keys available, basically. We don't just have to rely on these things in the physical world that we've been using,
Mhm.
breath and cold and heat and walking. And hopefully we can combine them all together. But we also have these new visual things that were previously impossible and currently just completely impossible for people in certain locations and in certain socioeconomic statuses, say someone who's
Right.
in the middle of Cambodia or something, hopefully they got Wi-Fi. Dude, their possibilities are going to open up with VR. This is not even just for this mental health kind of stuff, but just literally like education and everything else. And that's a whole other direction. But you can have this sort of virtual, like
Mhm.
we're talking on Zoom right now. This is great, but I mean, if we can be physically, I can see your legs, I can see your arms moving. There's a full body camera on you, and you're 3D. Your voice kind of vibrates
Mhm.
on me. Um, Maybe we have haptics,
Mhm.
and you touch my shoulder or whatever. You're doing your Feldenkrais lesson.
Mhm.
I think we're a ways away
Mhm.
from actually being able to do Feldenkrais or TRE or something in VR because we need um, sensors and trackers for full body. Basically VR is currently legless. If you go into and
Mhm.
bodiless, it's all kind of hands and eyes and neck and head, and that's as far as we've gotten so far. But the legs do not exist. Even the
Mhm.
avatars in Horizon World or Rec Room or all these sort of social platforms, they don't have legs. And now
Mhm.
Meta is releasing the legs on other people. Sort of AI is kind of generating, okay, this is how they're probably walking, but you can't see your own legs because that would be weird if you're moving your legs in real life, but you don't, but your legs in virtual world aren't moving because it doesn't know what your legs in real life are doing. So how would it be able to move them? So we need sort of,
Mhm.
you could hook up like little sensors and things to your ankles and your knees and your hips and stuff. And
Mhm.
some people are doing that. Actually, my little brother is pretty geeky on this stuff, and he's got all the sensors, and he's got a full body kind of tracker thing. Um, and there are actually there are he's got a girlfriend in VR, and oh god, it's the whole thing. He's 14, 15 years old, and you're like, okay, buddy, I guess that's a new way of having a girlfriend. But but another option might be to have external cameras. Like we have this, like the HTC Vive and the Vive Pro and all that had these sort of cameras around the room. These lasers that were kind of tracking your movements. I think recently they came out. There is a company that came out with just a simple smartphone app that kind of is kind of recording your body movements, and you kind of place your phone away. Maybe you have a tablet, a computer. We'll probably have something better, but just an external camera that's looking at you and not perfectly matching the movements because you don't have the sensors actually attached to your joints and stuff. But it's kind of that
Mhm.
plus AI maybe generating. Okay, probably his legs are moving in this way, so we can generate a
Mhm.
visual of that and create a full body avatar. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, if we can get sensors all over our body or find a way to track our full body, um, and if we could do that quickly, a Wi-Fi internet gets even faster and faster. We can kind of teleport. We can do these sort of. I can see your hologram here with me through my Apple Vision
Mhm.
Pro 10, 10s or whatever it is,
Mhm.
in 2030.
Mhm.
Um, and then you can like literally just be here with me and kind of guide me along. You can see my body. I can. We're here. That would be amazing.
Right.
Even in VR,
That would be amazing.
if we're both got the VR headsets on and I'm laying down and you're talking to me and there's like little visual things. Maybe you have a little wand and you splash a little purple dot above my knee and like touch that with your knee, touch that purple dot. I'm like, okay, and they're like, yeah, and we're kind of both in that virtual world together, fully embodied. You
Uh-huh.
can do this currently with your voice. We can go.
Right.
You can take me into VR and I can have my avatar in there, but you're gonna be looking at my avatar and it's like it's not do it's just turning his
Yeah,
head
I'm not
around
going
and
to see
stuff.
what I need to
There's
see.
no feedback.
Right. Right.
You need to see what's actually
Right.
the movements. Um, but if we can
Right.
actually see the movements in VR or AR, if we can sort of either through AR sort of teleport those holograms, so there's a hologram version of us, this like a
Mhm.
live feed, that would work. Or in VR, if we have all our
Yeah.
sensors on and you can sort of see how my each finger is moving and stuff to the micro
Yeah.
detail. That could also work, but we're not. The technology isn't really quite there yet. But these are I think these
Right.
Feldenkrais lessons and TRE lessons and stuff very well could and it probably will go in that direction, but it might take 10 years.
Mhm. Wow. Well, to me, it's just fun to imagine. I mean, I'm already kind of like I say. I watched the Apple video. I'm sort of blown away by what we currently have, and as we know from this year's extraordinary sort of the rapid pace of of AI development, since, I mean, it was happening all along, but became into the public broad awareness, with the launch of ChatGPT last November. We're just seeing this acceleration of some of these things. So personally, I feel really interested in kind of watching the space and seeing where it's headed. But I really appreciate taking time just to let us know what's here now and what's on the horizon.
Yeah, so if anyone's like, after listening to this, like, oh, now I'm going to go buy a VR headset, one, definitely wait until the Quest 3 comes out in a few weeks, because Quest 2 has been out since it's like 3 years old. It's actually pretty decent, but even the Quest 3, even the Apple Vision Pro, if you're looking for embodiment, if you're looking for all these sci-fi things we're talking about, that's not going to be there. The current VR will be great for passive consumption, for watching movies, for watching content, for experiencing some kind of nature or meditation experience. Social
Planks.
VR, planks. You get social VR. You can kind of go into VR chat or Horizon Worlds or something, a Rec Room, and hang out with these cartoony avatars, talk to your friends. Another version of Zoom. You can the workspace. You can have little virtual meetings and stuff, but you're not embodied. You're basically hearing. There's a microphone hooked up in headphones, and you're hearing like what we're hearing now with each other. And the world's more 3D, and you can use objects and stuff in there. So there are all these uses. There's games and all that, but in terms of like embodiment, it's not there yet. So don't expect to have a body in VR. You might have eyes if you get the latest headsets. You might have a neck. You have hands, but you might not have fingers. Unless you have these, there are some gloves and stuff that really get down to little details. And for haptics too, there are haptic gloves that you can feel actual things you're touching, hot and cold, and it taps into all those tiny little sensors on your hands. The gloves, a company called Haptex, HAPTX. That's one company. But yeah, you're not really embodied, so don't expect to have a TRE Feldenkrais experience in there. Yeah, it doesn't exist. But you can have meditation, you can have a social experience, you can just play a game, watch a movie. These are all great ways to do it. And the Quest is Meta's really priced things pretty nicely. They're definitely undercutting themselves in the beginning just to get the user base. So I mean, for like I think $500, you'll get this amazing new computer on your head. $3,500 for the Apple one, which is I can't imagine anyone besides developers buying that, or some just really really rich person. But these are I think it's worth dabbling in. It's not a huge price, but definitely just like kind of watch the field, because the next few years, definitely over the next decade, things are gonna change. We think the phone controls our life. We think the phone is our world. We are literally going to be in a Meta, Apple, Microsoft, Google world all around us on our bodies. But that's going to open up cool possibilities and scary ones. But yeah, definitely watch the field and get ready for some of this cool, more embodied stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, so one thing I haven't asked you yet, either in this call or even offline, is what are some of to what extent do you use VR and AR currently, and what applications do you find meaningful or enjoy at this stage?
I really would like to use AR, but AR is still ultimately trapped in the smartphone. It's Pokemon Go, that kind of stuff. So it's not
okay.
It's no fun.
Okay.
So I don't enjoy AR. I don't think most people enjoy AR, but it's not AR. It's just another smartphone thing. I mean, how long can you walk around catching Pokemon in tiny space? There are some glasses. Magic Leap was one that kind of flopped, and InReal's another one. There are some of these glasses, but they're and the HoloLens from Microsoft, but that's mostly used for industrial, military kind of use, and it's also very expensive. So we don't really have Apple sort of this first wave of true even then, it's not really true AR glasses. It's just sort of an early the 1970s computer version of it, and but we're getting closer to actual AR. So AR I don't do. I've downloaded some of the apps from Niantic. Niantic is sort of the guys behind Pokemon Go. They also have other apps like Ingress and Pikmin Blue, and they're games to your smartphone. I don't enjoy them, so I don't do AR. VR, I still got an old Oculus Rift, which came out in 2016. So it's got these. It's a VR. It's a beautiful device, and it works perfectly well. The quality is just basically as high as these newest devices because it's powered by my NVIDIA powered gaming PC. That's the computer. So yeah, maybe the lenses aren't perfect, but I had the sensors. I use that, but to answer your question, is my favorite experiences are these ones that put me into a different mental state than I couldn't normally be in. For example, these, I don't know if these exist anymore on the Quest, but there's one called Ayahuasca VR, and basically you experience what it's like to be on ayahuasca. And I've never taken it. I haven't really thought about taking it, but it trips you out. There's one called Goliath VR. I think these are all older ones. I'm still kind of trapped in you know how you listen to the music from your youth? I'm still like watching the VR from my early VR days. I'm like, dude, there's better stuff now. You can move on from these. I'm still kind of listening to the 90s music or something. Like I haven't discovered the new stuff. So, but Goliath VR is cool because it's this like experience of being schizophrenic. This guy, it's sort of just the audio, the visuals, and there's this one point where you talking in the microphone, you say your name and you're like, Michael, and then later on, like 5 minutes later, it's like Michael, and it's all around you, and you're like, you're overwhelmed, and you're in this tight space, and you're alone. You feel alone. You feel the depression, the sadness, the loneliness, the isolation of people who are in prison, the people who are are mentally ill, you wonder, why is this guy on this fat dude on his computer all day? Why doesn't he get a job? And you're like, I get it. This is an intense experience, and it can't capture it fully. But yeah, there's that one, Goliath VR. That was cool. The ayahuasca VR. This is one of the early ones too. Dreams of Dolly. Basically, it took a Dolly painting, and you walk through the painting in VR with a little kind of light, kind of windy sounds, and you're just walking through a 3D version of the painting. So I definitely enjoy these kind of semi-meditative experiences, these solitary experiences where I'm just walking, exploring through a world. I also always love those video games too, like Zelda, kind of Mario, big worlds that don't pressure you to get it done, hurry, kill the guy. I'm like, I just want to chill. So I walk around and explore. So you can explore through an art, you can explore what it's like to be another person. And like we talked about, maybe if they had these animal ones, those would be my favorite ones. If I can have like a whole animal pack, and you buy each animal for like extra $10, I would be buying these things up. That's where I am. Also the social one, I have a bunch of brothers, and there was a point where everyone had a Quest a couple of years ago, and everyone was using it. Now they're mostly in the closet. But there's a point where all my brothers and stuff had the Quest 2, and we would pop into VR chat, which is sort of just this big world where you walk around, and it's a chat room basically, but it's 3D and immersive, and it's fun. And there's strangers in there, and there's one called Rec Room, but Rec Room seems to be flooded with children, which is not supposed to be there. But it's just like, okay, get out of here. I don't want to be in elementary school. There was one called Alt Space. Alt Space was another cool one, sort of in the original sort of social VR places. Microsoft bought them out, and eventually, just this past few months, they've killed the project, so that's gone. There will be. I enjoy the social experiences, kind of like the 3D versions of Zoom, VR chat, Rec Room, and stuff like that. And then these meditative, explorative experiences, like I've mentioned. Those are definitely my favorites. I don't want to play games. I don't want to. There's also one back in the day. There's one called I forget what it's called. It's about the phobia, fear one. So it puts you in these scary environments, and like you're on an airplane, like it's crashing, or you're up in this tall building, or these spiders and things. And I definitely enjoyed those too. Even if I'm not scared of it, it's kind of fun to be in a kind of scary little world. Not like I don't want to be shooting things and attacking things, or I don't want to play a game. I just want to be there,
experience things.
Yeah,
interesting.
See, to change your perspective, to see other perspectives on for existence. See, I could other possibilities. That's what I want to see. I want to see the other possibilities of perception. Nice,
awesome. Well, did we leave any? I'm sure we left lots of stones unturned. But anything we need to we need to throw into the soup before we wrap up?
I think we hit it pretty well. They're definitely. I'm gonna wake up in 10 minutes and think, oh my God, how did we not talk about that? But one other quick point. I know I'm just sort of digressing to the beginning point, but one other great thing about the eye tracking too is it's not just that you can control things with your eyes and you can be hands free and stuff, but also it's this foveated rendering, right? So this is the main sort of why we use it. Normally in normal vision, the center of our vision, right in front of our fovea, is really crisp and has high fidelity, and it's we can see it really well. It's high acuity, but on the periphery, it's kind of blurry. Mm-hmm. And the current VR, well, not now, but up until the past year or so, is you have sort of the high fidelity all around you. But now with the eye tracking, it can track where your eyes are, and the beauty of that is it can render all the high powered resolution right into the center and keep the rest kind of blurry a little bit. And that's great for two reasons. That's great, one, because it's going to look more realistic and feel more real. But two, it's going to reduce the computing power, and you can redirect that computing power to other things. And that's going to make it more possible to have richer, more immersive experiences, because you're not wasting all this. We don't need this to be all crisp over here. I don't need to see the details.
Right, where you're not looking.
Like how many fingers am I holding up? I can't say. Now I can say, okay, 4 fingers. But until I got here, I have no idea. I can feel it because I've got that motor map. But if this so right. These are kind of another cool thing about another reason why eye tracking is really cool. It's sort of a turning point. Random last note, but that's one thing I kind of wanted to add.
I love that. Super cool. Awesome. Well, everybody should definitely tune in to Brain Shaman. You can find it at brainshaman.com. Is there any other anything else any other way people can contact you or see anything you're up to?
That's kind of my main place. I'm recently become halfway active on LinkedIn. I have to figure out what my LinkedIn address is. I think it's Mike J. Waite. But if you type in Brain Shaman, I'll probably pop up Michael Waite. Mike J. Waite on LinkedIn. That's I don't really use Instagram. I'm not really active on Twitter or anything like that. But yeah, if you add me on LinkedIn, I'll probably, at this point in my life, I'm like pretty happy just to add people and talk to new people. So we can talk there, or just listen to the podcast. Those are probably the only two things at the moment. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Red Beard Embodiment Podcast. To learn more, visit us at redbeardsomatictherapy.com or send me an email at alex@redbeardsomatictherapy.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, help spread the word by subscribing and sharing with others. Hope to see you next time.